Hello, this is Slow Night, Sleepy Stories. In the deep, snowy mountains, the majestic white tiger moves without a sound. It does not rush, nor does it boast of its power. It simply waits for the perfect moment, knowing that its time will surely come. Tonight's story is about a hero named Seol In-gwi, who was born with the spirit of this white tiger. For a long time he lived in poverty and silence, hidden from the world's eye. But his silence was not weakness. It was a time of gathering strength. Perhaps you too are going through a season of waiting. If today felt heavy or slow, please remember this. Greatness often wears the mask of patience. Just like the white tiger resting in the snow, you are not stopping, you are preparing to rise. So tonight, let go of your anxiety. Trust in your own hidden strength and rest deeply under the protection of the guardian spirit. The night is yours. The Tale of Seol In-gwi. In the early years of the Jengwon era of the Great Tang Dynasty, there was a scholar in Longmun County, Yongmun-hyun, whose surname was Seol and given name was Myung. His family was well off, and his nature was generous and benevolent. He did not hoard his wealth, so the villagers praised him. He and his wife, Lady Ryu, lived in great harmony, but they had no children until late in life, which the couple lamented every day. Lady Ryu suddenly fell ill and died. He took a second wife, Lady Jang, whose beauty was peerless in the world. Not long after, she conceived and was about to give birth. One day, the Wono, Squire Sol Myung, had a dream in which a white four-headed tiger rushed into the house. He woke up startled, realizing it was but a fleeting dream, and considered it extremely strange. Shortly after, a servant girl rushed in and said, "The madam has safely given birth to a son." The Wono hurriedly went in and saw that Lady Jang had indeed given birth to a son, so he was overjoyed and congratulated Lady Jang. At this time, people in the village saw 5 colored clouds covering the Wonoi's house. Hearing of the birth of the son, they said, "This child will surely become greatly noble." The Wonoi named the child In-gwi and loved him without end. As he grew up, his appearance was surpassing, his demeanor was dignified, he was fluent in literature without having been taught, and he loved archery and horse riding, seeking out heroes to befriend. The Wonoi, wary of his overly boisterous nature, scolded him, saying, "You do not study but prize martial arts. This is not what I hoped for. From now on, do not let me see you." In-gwi bowed his head to the ground and said, "Writing is merely for recording one's name. Currently, the world is unsettled and bandits are everywhere. I wish to learn martial arts to destroy traitors and leave my name in history. How could I become a mediocre scholar?" The Wano rebuked him largely, saying, "Though your talent may be like Grand Duke Jiang or Zhuge Liang, you do not listen to your father's command. Go away, do as you please, but do not bring disgrace upon your parents." In-gwi apologized in fear and withdrew, feeling gloomy and unhappy. Not long after, the Wonoi fell ill and his life ended. In-gwi and his mother mourned with extreme grief and buried him in the ancestral mountain. The family fortune gradually declined. They sold all the slaves and fields. The mother and son could not endure the hunger and cold, sorrowing day and night. One day, the heavens and earth turned dark, and flames surrounded the house. Lady Jang looked up to the sky and wailed, saying, "Heaven intends to kill us mother and son, so how can we live?" She jumped into the fire. In the confusion, In-gwi could not hold her back in time. Seeing her about to die, he wailed and tried to jump in as well. The village people held him back and saved him, so he did not die. The villagers raked through the ashes, recovered Lady Jang's remains, and buried her. In-gwi wailed, day and night, wandering the streets. There was no one who did not pity him. One person felt sorry for him and said, "Do not grieve in vain. Raise sheep at my house and plan for your livelihood." In-gwi gave thanks and followed the master. In-gwi was no ordinary person. He ate 1 mal, a large measure of rice a day. The master, troubled by the amount, said, "Looking at you, you are extraordinary. It is not right for you to herd sheep. Find a benevolent master and achieve your wishes." In-gwi bade farewell and left the gate. Having no relatives, he sighed deeply and walked aimlessly. He arrived at a place where the mountains and rivers were beautiful and the village was wealthy. Seeing a house lush with pine and bamboo, he went in to look. An old man wearing a scholar's cap and holding a goosefoot cane stood there, his presence imposing. In-gwi tried to avoid him. The old man asked, "What kind of boy are you, coming deep in here?" In-gwi said. "This little one is a beggar without parents." The old man said, "I am Ryu Jung-se. I gave up my official post and returned to my hometown to finish my remaining years. If you have no place to stay, stay at my house and water the flowers." In-gwi was overjoyed and gave thanks. From that day on, the old man kept In-gwi in the outer quarters and looked after him. One day, In-gwi watered the flowers and, feeling tired, lay down in the flower garden and fell asleep. It was around the middle of the 3rd month. Lord Ryu had one daughter. Her peerless beauty was unmatched, and her parents cherished her dearly. At this time, she was 13 years old. She was leaning on her desk, dozing for a moment, when suddenly she saw a dragon coiled in the flower garden. She woke up startled. It was a dream. Thinking it strange, she went to the flower garden and looked. There was nothing there. But in the place where the dragon had been coiled, a boy was lying asleep. She thought, "This boy is surely a noble person. I will entrust my life to him." She took off her red inner jacket and covered him. In-gwi woke up, saw it, and was flustered, asking, "Lady, why do you do this?" The young lady lowered her voice and said, "Please do not leak this out." In-gwi said, "Since fate is like this and you care for me, how could I leak it?" A few days later, Lord Ryu had In-gwi sweep the yard. Suddenly, the wind blew, lifting his clothes, and the red jacket underneath was visible. Lord Ryu shouted loudly, "I pitied you and kept you in my household. How can you be so rude?" In-gwi, bewildered, did not know the details, so he knelt and said, "Master, for what matter do you scold me?" The Lord said angrily, "The red jacket you are wearing underneath, where is it from? Confess immediately." In-gwi could not hide it and reported the truth. The Lord pounded the railing, called his wife and daughter, and rebuked them greatly, saying, "For what reason did you take off your clothes and give them to In-gwi? There is surely a private affair. What use is there in keeping you alive?" The young lady, terrified out of her wits, held back tears and answered, "Master, please cease your anger. I will tell you what happened." The Lord said furiously, "A girl in the inner quarters engaging in such scandalous behavior. How can I tolerate it? The bond between parent and child is heavy, but though I should kill you, I cannot bear to do so. I cast you out. Take In-gwi, go far away, and do not let me see you again." The lady mother was distraught and begged, "Though the daughter has erred, please distinguish jade from stone, truth from falsehood." The Lord shouted in anger, "Disgrace to the family! How can you say this is excessive?" He pulled a sword from the wall and said, "If you try to stop me again, I will not consider our relationship." His anger was fierce. The lady could not stop him again. The Lord abused his daughter, kicked her and In-gwi out the gate, and ordered the servants, "If anyone shelters them nearby, I will punish them with the same crime." The servants were shocked, and the lady grieved but could do nothing, so she gathered a few clothes and valuables and sent them out. At this time, In-gwi and the young lady came outside. The road ahead was dark, and they walked aimlessly. In-gwi said to the young lady, "We are unfortunate that things have turned out like this for no reason. How can it not be sad? Now we have nowhere to go and rely on. My maternal uncle Jang Myung-gi lives in Punghwa village. How about we go there, rely on him, and look to the future?" The young lady, swallowing her shame, wept and said, "Unfortunately, because of you, things are like this. Whether joy or sorrow, let us go quickly." They led each other to Punghwa village, saw the maternal uncle, explained the situation, and asked to stay. However, his wife, Dusi, was not benevolent. When Lord Seol In-gwi's father was alive, the family property was abundant, so she was very respectful. But now she despised them and said to Lord Jang, "We might keep In-gwi, but how can we keep his wife too? Lady Ryu's physiognomy is unlucky. Surely there will be harm." Myung-gi was naturally afraid of his wife, so he stayed silent. Dusi spoke again. "Make In-gwi go live in a farmhouse to the south, and do not act as if you are close relatives." Myung-gi followed her words and told them to live 30 away to the south. In-gwi took Lady Ryu and went there. The mountains and rivers were rugged, and the trees were dense. He cut wood to build a house and stayed there. Their livelihood was bleak. He would sometimes carry wood to sell or weave shoes. With the help of the villagers, they barely sustained their lives. Meanwhile, the prince of Chin of Tang, Li Shimin, ascended to the throne as emperor. While receiving the morning assembly of civil and military officials, he said to So Mugong, "I had a dream last night. I was fighting the bandit Hap So Moon. I lost and fled, falling into the water. Unable to escape, I was caught by the bandit and urged to sign a surrender. It was truly critical. Suddenly, from the southwest, a young general in a white robe rushed in, drove away the bandits, and saved me. I woke up and it was a dream. What is the fortune of this?" Mugong divined and said, "It is a most auspicious omen. Later, you will obtain an eternally loyal subject at Wolho Fortress." The emperor recorded this and issued a decree to all places to find the young general in the white robe. Suddenly, an envoy from Bakchi arrived. He was called in and seen covering his face with black silk. The emperor asked the reason. The envoy prostrated himself, weeping, and reported, "By royal command, I was coming to present tribute to your majesty. But Hap So Moon of the Goguryeo kingdom took all the treasures I brought, tattooed my face, and chased me away. My face is hideous, so I covered it with a veil." The emperor was greatly angered. He had the veil removed and looked. On the cheeks was carved, "Tang Emperor Li Shimin is unprincipled, harms his own flesh and blood, and imprisons his father. He is a traitorous rebel." The emperor was furious and said, "The bandit insults me like this. Now I wish to raise an army to strike him. Who can be the vanguard?" A general came out from the ranks and said, "This small general will capture the bandit alive." Everyone looked. It was Man Chol. The emperor was very pleased and ordered the vanguard seal to be given to him. Bang Hyunryong and Du Yohoi petitioned. "In the past, Emperor Yang of Sui attacked Liaodong and perished. Now, if we attack a small bandit and do not win, our dignity will be damaged and there may be great harm. The mountain roads are rugged and the vegetation is thick. We pray your majesty to consider carefully." Suddenly, one person shouted loudly, "You are rotten civil officials. If you are afraid, shrink your necks and stay put. Why do you break our morale?" He petitioned, "Although your subject has no talent, I will behead the bandit." Everyone looked. It was Ulji Gyeongdeok, Yuchigong. The emperor was greatly pleased and asked, "With what clever strategy will you defeat the bandit?" An old general came out from the ranks and said, "Your Majesty, do not worry. Though your subject is old, I will behead the bandit." Looking, it was Jin Sukbo Chinshubao. He was 70 years old, but his bravery was peerless. The emperor was very pleased and appointed him vanguard. Gyeongdeok indignantly competed with Jin Sukbo for the vanguard position. The emperor said, "Do not fight. Whoever lifts that cauldron, walks around 3 times, and puts it back in its place, shall be the vanguard." Gyeongdeok immediately lifted the cauldron, walked around 3 times, and set it down. His expression remained unchanged. Sukbo went down indignantly and lifted the cauldron, but could not turn 3 times. He vomited blood. The emperor was greatly shocked, had the eunuchs support and save him, and appointed Ulji Gong Gyeongdeok as the Grand Marshal. Gyeongdeok gave thanks for the grace, came out, drilled the soldiers, posted notices calling for strong men, and searched for the white-robed young general. Meanwhile, Seol In-gwi lived with Lady Ryu in Punghwa village, and making a living was difficult. One day he lamented with Lady Ryu, "Our hunger and cold are like this. I wish to do business, but I have no capital. I have no learned skills, so I will gather wood." He carried an axe, went up the mountain, and was cutting wood. From behind the mountain, the sound of cannon fire arose, and 7 strong men came running, shouting loudly, "What kind of person are you to cut wood in our mountain stronghold?" In-gwi said, "In an ownerless, empty mountain, how can you claim to be the owner? Though I am single-handed and unarmed, I do not fear you lot." The 7 men were enraged and rushed at him all at once. In-gwi shouldered his axe, glared with his eyes, bristled his tiger-like beard, and his majesty was imposing. The 7 men were greatly shocked and praised him. "How is he so magnificent?" They rushed at him again simultaneously. In-gwi was enraged. He dashed left and right, blocking them. The 7 men thrust with spears. In-gwi blocked with his axe, grabbed 3 men in one hand and threw them far away. 4 men rushed in furiously. In-gwi was enraged, grabbed the 4 men and threw them. They fell down 10 paces away. The 7 men gathered their wits, knelt, and said, "We were unprincipled and did not recognize the general, offending your dignity. Please forgive us." In-gwi, seeing their submission, asked each of their names. One was Wang Sonui, another Jusong-un, and so on. The 7 men said, "We have had no one to match us, but the general's dignity is like a heavenly god. How could we not surrender? We have lived in these mountains plundering, but today by heavenly fortune we have met the general. We will serve you with all our hearts and strength." In-gwi said, "Since you all are magnificent, it is right to help the country and pass your names to future generations. Why become mountain bandits? How about we 8 offer sacrifices to heaven and imitate the Peach Garden Oath of old?" The 7 men were overjoyed. They invited In-gwi into the stronghold, set up a feast, sacrificed to heaven and earth, and swore brotherhood in order. In-gwi said, "I hear recently that the Son of Heaven is personally leading a campaign and recruiting warriors. If we do not establish ourselves at this time, for what time shall we wait? It would be right for you brothers to go up to the capital and achieve success. What are your thoughts?" The 7 men were overjoyed and urged him to go. In-gwi said, "Brothers, go first. I will provide for my family and then go. Let us promise to meet in the capital." The 7 men burned down the stronghold, packed our belongings, bid farewell, and headed for the capital. At this time, In-gwi returned home with a face full of joy. Lady Ryu asked, "Is there some good matter?" In-gwi told the whole story. Lady Ryu said, "Since my husband's will is such, it is what a man must do. Now that we have no parents or close relatives, how will you manage travel expenses?" In-gwi said, "I will discuss it with my maternal uncle." He went to Myunggi's house, finished the formalities, and said, "Now the state is recruiting warriors, and your nephew intends to go. But I have no money. If you lend me a slave, I will repay you later." Just as he was speaking, Dusi said, "Fame is a noble thing. How could we not help?" She immediately fed him wine and side dishes and said, "Do not worry about the slave. Plow the field in Pungwadong first, then go." In-gwi gave thanks, immediately led an ox, and went to plow the field. Myunggi was shocked and said to Dusi, "If you have nothing to give, it is right to just send him away. Why send a young child to a place of death?" Dusi said with a straight face, "If we keep In-gwi, I cannot live." She threw a tantrum, so Myunggi made no reply. Dusi hid and watched him plow the field. Suddenly, a great wind arose. Heaven and earth turned dark, and something fell to the ground with a sound like a thunderclap. In-gwi thought it strange, lifted his whip, and drove the ox, but the ox trembled and would not go. Suspicious, he looked and saw that the thing that had fallen transformed into a huge beast and rushed at him. In-gwi hurriedly struck it. The beast's 2 legs broke and were stuck in the middle of the field, and its body turned into a gust of blue wind and fled. In-gwi looked closely and saw writing on the leg, "Beneath this is a stone box. Seol In-gwi shall open it." In-gwi, suspicious, dug and saw there was indeed a stone box. He opened it and saw silver armor, a silver helmet, and a square heaven trident, Bang-gok, inside. He closed the stone box again, finished plowing the field, led the ox, and returned. Myunggi was greatly pleased, but Dusi was greatly shocked in her heart. She lied, saying, "I intended to give my nephew a slave and sell a bow, but there is no one to buy it, so what can be done?" She had no intention of giving him travel gear. In-gwi, having no choice, returned and told Lady Ryu about Dusi's words and the armor and weapons he had obtained. Lady Ryu was startled and pleased, saying, "Human life depends on heaven. How can Dusi harm you? Since heaven has already given you treasures, please be careful not to leak this. If Dusi knows, there will surely be harm." In-gwi sighed, went to the field, took the armor and spear, gave thanks to heaven, and was coming back. Suddenly, black clouds became thick in the valley. Heaven and earth grew dark, and a horse like white snow shouted and rushed at him. In-gwi saw the horse's color was like white snow, its mane and tail like green silk, its eyes like lightning, and its sound like thunder. In-gwi tried to catch it. Suddenly the clouds cleared, and an old man came with a boy holding a saddle and bridle. He said, "The general was worried about military equipment, so I brought a 1,000-li dragon piebald horse. Give me the price and buy it." In-gwi hurriedly bowed twice and said, "The old general indicates a fine horse, and I am grateful, but my family is poor and I have no way to buy it." The old man said, "If you wish to ride it, take it. Why discuss the price?" Suddenly he was gone. In-gwi bowed countless times toward the air, led the horse, and returned. Lady Ryu asked the reason. In-gwi told the whole story, and Lady Ryu was also pleased. In-gwi bade farewell, saying, "You take care of yourself. After I achieve merit, I will send down wealth and honor to repay your virtuous benevolence." Lady Ryu said happily, "It has been several years since your concubine met you, and the flesh and blood in my due is several months old." In-gwi said, "My journey has no fixed duration. If a boy is born, name him Pyeongsan, and if a girl is born, name her Gumryeon." Upon parting, In-gwi wore the silver armor and silver helmet and rode the white piebald horse. His majesty was imposing. Lady Ryu leaned on the gate and watched from afar. He moved swiftly over the mountain until his form was distant. She sighed long, went inside, and prayed to heaven and earth for his success. In-gwi traveled and arrived below Jiangzhou Fortress. He found lodging and looked for Wang Sonui and the others. He went to the camp of Commander Jang Sagwi to enlist. Sagwi called him in and looked. In-gwi's majesty was imposing, and he possessed strategies that could startle the heavens. He was truly a hero. Surprised, he asked, "What is your name and where do you live?" In-gwi answered, "This small general is Seol In-gwi from Pungmun-hyeon." Sagwi asked, "What talents do you have?" He answered, "I know the 6 secret teachings and 3 strategies, military classics, and the art of employing troops." Sagwi thought, "This person is surely the white-robed young general." He flew into a rage and scolded, "You enter the camp rudely in a white robe. This is mocking military law." He ordered the attendants to drag him down, beat him 20 times, and cast him out. In-gwi sighed. "The world is in great turmoil, but a treacherous official plays with power. How can the bandits be pacified?" Suddenly he met Wang Sonui, expressed his feelings of separation, and told the before and after. Sonui was greatly shocked, went in to see Sagwi and said, "Seol In-gwi's bravery is peerless. Why do you not use him?" Sagwi shouted, "He was extremely rude, so I cast him out. How dare you speak of him again?" He had him dragged out, beaten 10 times, and cast out. Wang Sonui came out and said, "Little brother tried to speak for you, elder brother, and met with expulsion as well. How can a great man bear insult from a common fellow? I will go elsewhere to avenge this insult. Let us go together." In-gwi bid farewell to each other, and filled with grief and indignation thought, "I came out after suffering 10,000 hardships, but how could I know I would be insulted by a traitor? If I go back, I break Lady Ryu's hope and will face the ridicule of relatives. If I stay, the traitor does not tolerate me. It is a dilemma. I will die and forget my anger." He got off his horse, went under a bridge, and attempted to kill himself. Meanwhile, Jeonggyogum Chung Yaojin was inspecting each camp and going to Sagwi's camp. He saw a masterless horse on the bridge, stomping its hooves and blocking the way. Suspicious at heart, he looked down under the bridge and saw a person trying to commit suicide. Startled, he held him back and stopped him, asking the reason. In-gwi reported the full story. Jeonggyogum said indignantly, "A man should support the state and pass his name to future generations. Why do you commit suicide?" He added, "You follow me. I will tell Sagwi to employ you." In-gwi gave thanks and followed him. Duke Jeong-sagwi knew the state duke was coming, came out to the camp gate to meet him, entered and performed the rites. They sat down. Gyogum asked, "The commander is gathering troops. How is the military situation?" Sagwi answered, "All is prepared." Gyogum called In-gwi to the front of the tent and rebuked Sagwi. "In overseeing the great affairs of the state, why do you cast out and not use a hero like this?" Sagwi said, "I did not know his talent, and he was extremely rude, so I did not use him." Gyogum said, "This man's heroic spirit appears in his outward appearance. How can you say he has no talent? When the country is recruiting warriors, such a general came on his own, yet the commander does not use him. This is neglecting the great affairs of the state and prioritizing private feelings. I will duly assess your crime with the Son of Heaven." Sagwi was greatly afraid and apologized. "I will use him heavily." He immediately made In-gwi a horse groom. Gyogum said to In-gwi, "Wait for now. If you succeed in the future, you will be used greatly." And he returned. Meanwhile, it was reported that Hocheon Tongdal was invading the imperial city. Jang Sagwi told In-gwi to face him. In-gwi immediately rode his horse, brandished his trident, and shouted loudly, "I will cut off your head and make my name shine." Tongdal was enraged, raised his spear, and fought. Within 10 bouts, Tongdal could not match him and fled. In-gwi took advantage of the momentum, whipped his horse, shouted like a thunderclap, raised his trident, cut Tongdal in two, and dashed left and right. The heads of the bandits fell like autumn leaves in the wind. Seol watched the victory and defeat from the platform. Seeing In-gwi behead Tongdal, he feared the Son of Heaven might know. He rang the gongs to withdraw the troops, hid In-gwi in the camp, and claimed the credit as his own. At this time, Mugong petitioned the Son of Heaven. "The military is orderly. Please march quickly." The emperor was pleased that Tongdal was killed and said, "Jang Seol is a remarkable general. Now that we are to march, the Grand Marshal's seal is at the Jin residence. The State Duke, Jin Sukbo, has a quick temper. If I retrieve the seal while he is ill, his anger may rise and worsen his illness. I will personally visit him and ask for the seal." He arrived at the Jin residence. A young general hurriedly came out to meet him. This was Jin's son, Huioke. Though young, his strength was surpassing, no different from his father. Arriving at the middle gate, a lady paid her respects. The emperor asked, "Who are you?" Mugong replied, "It is the State Duke's wife." The emperor said, "Madam, be at ease." He arrived at the State Duke's sickbed. The household servants announced that the emperor had personally arrived. The duke opened his eyes, looked, and tried to get up. The emperor stopped him, saying, "Lord, do not move your sick body." The State Duke apologized. "It is awe-inspiring that your majesty personally visits this humble house." Tears flowed down his face. The emperor comforted him and said, "Right now, the world is in turmoil, so the position of marshal cannot be left empty for long. If the Lord lends the seal for a moment, I will send it back after the illness is cured." The State Duke immediately presented the seal and could not stop sighing at length. The emperor was also moved to pity, and jade tears soaked his dragon robe. The emperor said, "Lord, do not worry." He called in Huioke, saw his appearance and frame, and said, "I have one daughter, and I wish to make you my son-in-law. Lord, do not decline." The State Duke gave thanks for the imperial grace. The emperor comforted him again, returned to the palace, and immediately gave the seal to Gyeongdaeok. The State Duke sat Huioke down and said, "After I surrendered the seal, my mind was troubled and my illness became critical. I competed for the vanguard with Gyeongdaeok, but suddenly fell ill and could not succeed. It is sad. After I die, exhaust your loyalty and strength to serve the state." Huioke could not overcome his sorrow and said, "Your son will fight Gyeongdaeok and take back the seal." He put on his father's armor and helmet, took a spear, mounted a horse, rushed into Uljigong's camp, and scolded, "Gyeongdaeok, how dare you take my father's vanguard seal? I will decide life and death and take it back." He rushed in, and no one dared to stop him. The gatekeeper hurriedly reported, "Jinhuok enters alone with a single spear and demands the martial seal." Gyeongdaeok's son Uljinam was enraged and said to his father, "Jinhuok insults us presumptuously. This small general will wear the seal, go out, and fight." Before he finished speaking, Huioke arrived at the camp gate and shouted insults. Uljinam was enraged, rode his piebald horse, raised his bamboo joint whip, rushed out and scolded, "Young child, how dare you insult an elder?" He rushed in and fought. The martial arts of the two generals were similar to their fathers. After 20 bouts, victory and defeat were indistinguishable. Huioke thought, "If I do not win, he will despise me even more." He fought another 30 bouts. Huioke bent his body, grabbed the seal cord, and tried to snatch it. Jinam held firmly and did not let go. The two wrestled on horseback, but victory was undecided. The generals saw the danger, went into the tent, and reported, "The two generals are in danger. This small general wishes to stop the fight." The middle army general said, "If you stop it, it will be a great merit." In-gwi immediately went to the front of the formation, shot an arrow, and hit the seal cord they were both holding, causing it to fall. The two men were startled and each backed away. The soldiers of each camp laughed loudly. The emperor called Huioke, persuaded him, and sent him away. He led the great army toward the east. Flags covered the sun, and swords and spears were like frost. They marched and entered Yuju fortress to feed the three armies. It was exactly the third watch of the night. Soldiers reported, "The ground inside the fortress has cracked open, 10 jang wide. Black clouds and dark winds are thick, we do not know the depth." The emperor was greatly shocked and told Mugong to examine the fortune. Mugong went to see Gyeongdaeok and returned, reporting, "This is a good omen." The emperor called Jang Sagwi and told him to explore inside the earth cavern. Sagwi received the order, returned, and was at a loss. He invited Seol In-gwi, told him the situation, and wailed. In-gwi pitied him and asked to go. Sagwi was overjoyed and asked, "What equipment shall I prepare?" In-gwi said, "Tie ropes to the four corners of a large basket and attach a bell. Proceed according to the sound." He took a short sword, went to the earth cavern, sat in the basket, and uncoiled the rope. He went down gradually until he reached a place where he touched around. In one hole, red light was brilliant, and on a stone door was carved, "The person to open this door is Seol In-gwi." He opened the door and went in. A red dragon and a white tiger were fighting. The dragon was winning, and the tiger was exhausted. In-gwi raised his sword and struck the dragon. It was hit on the left leg and fled. The tiger disappeared. The red dragon corresponded to Hap So-mun, and the white tiger corresponded to Seol In-gwi. Because the blue or red dragon was hit in the leg, from this point on, Hap So-mun's left arm was painful. In-gwi went in further. The sound of bells and stone chimes was heard, and the world was bright. He looked around. 5 colored structures soared into the air. He went up and saw a stone box placed there. He opened it and found 3 books. He opened them and saw they were books on astronomy, geography, the 5 elements, yin and yang, and magic arts. He was overjoyed, hid the books in his bosom, and viewed the scenery. Suddenly, a fairy came holding a gold box and a jade bottle. In-gwi was startled and tried to avoid her. The fairy said, "How has a guest from the mundane world come here?" In-gwi hurriedly apologized. "I was escorting the Son of Heaven to attack Liaodong, and by imperial command came into the earth cavern." The fairy spoke from afar. "Go out quickly, save the Son of Heaven from danger. There will be a day we meet again later. Return quickly." Startled, he found the door, came out, found the basket, sat in it, and shook the bell. The soldiers heard the bell sound and wound the rope at once. In-gwi came out of the earth cavern. A fierce wind blew, and the hole closed up. Sagwi was greatly shocked and pleased, and asked about the situation in the earth cavern. In-gwi thought, "Sagwi is a traitor. I cannot tell him the truth." He said, "The inside of the cavern was dim, and there were countless monsters. When I struck them with a whip, they all disappeared. A dark wind surrounded my body, so I was startled, shook the bell, and came out. The hole is blocked. Report it like this." Sagwi immediately pretended it was so and reported it. The emperor said, "If not for Sagwi's remarkable talent, how could we know the situation?" He told Sagwi to set up the Dragon Gate formation. Sagwi accepted the order, returned to camp, and thought, "I preserved my life with In-gwi's merit, but how can I set up the Dragon Gate formation?" He called Seol Yontae and told him to set it up, but he also did not know. He called In-gwi and said, "If you set up this formation, the merit will be great. I have recorded all your previous merits." In-gwi said, "Text implies agreement or negotiation." Sagwi gave him the command flag and said, "If you set up this formation, I will give you my official post." In-gwi went up to the commander's platform, called 5 generals to respond to the 5 directions, ordered 80 generals to spread out as the 28 mansions, taught them the method of advance and retreat through the gates of life and death, and In-gwi issued an order. "Follow the gongs and drums to advance and retreat clearly. Those who violate the order will be beheaded." Sagwi said, "You stay in the rear camp for now." He immediately reported. The emperor watched with Mugong and Uljigong, praised Jang Sagwi, and said, "Why should we worry about the bandits?" Gyeongdaeok petitioned, "This is not Sagwi's talent." The emperor said, "How does Gyeongdaeok know?" He answered, "If he set it up himself, tell him to withdraw it." The emperor immediately called Sagwi and said he wanted to see the formation withdrawn. Sagwi said, "I will go back and withdraw it." He returned and told In-gwi to withdraw it. In-gwi immediately raised the flag, recited a spell, and bowed twice. Below the yellow flag, black clouds rose, consecutively surrounded and crossed east and west. In a moment, it was withdrawn. Sagwi immediately reported to the emperor. The emperor was pleased and said, "Your talent is remarkable." He gave Sagwi the commander's flag and told him to think of a clever strategy to attack the bandits. Sagwi gave thanks, returned, hid In-gwi deeply, and consulted him. The emperor gathered the officials and asked Sagui for a strategy to attack Liaodong. Sagui petitioned, "I will withdraw, think, and report." Gyeongdeok said, "Every time he wants to withdraw, surely there is a teacher in his army." Sagui returned embarrassed and called In-gwi and asked. In-gwi wrote down a clever strategy. Sagui immediately presented it to the emperor. The emperor was overjoyed. "If it is like this, why should we worry?" Gyeongdeok reported, "This strategy is not his own thought." The emperor said, "How do you know?" He answered, "Your subject will ask. Please watch." He told Sagui to recite the contents. Sagui said, "How can I remember a momentary record?" The emperor said, "It is hard to record again." He said, "I give you the vanguard seal. Think of a clever strategy to pacify Liaodong." Gyeongdeok said, "Now the Son of Heaven will cross the Great Sea. We must make it so neither the sky above nor the water below is seen. Think of a strategy." Sagui said, "I will withdraw and think." Gyeongdeok said, "You go to think for every matter. What is this?" Sagui said, "How can I think of great affairs carelessly?" Gyeongdeok said, "Whatever, think quickly." Sagui immediately went and asked In-gwi. In-gwi said, "It is not difficult. Drive rings into 30 large ships, lay boards on top, decorate them with colored silk, set up curtains, raise embroidered tents and white canvas awnings high, arrange musicians on left and right, and advance. How would it not be like a flat land?" Sagui was overjoyed, told In-gwi to go to the waterside and prepare, and reported to Gyeongdeok. Gyeongdeok said, "Surely there is a teacher." Sagui said, "How could I have learned from another?" Meanwhile, Yuji-gyeom provoked a fight with 30,000 iron cavalry. Gyeongdeok rushed out and shouted, "Coming warrior, announce your name." The enemy general shouted, "I am Yuji-gyeom, younger brother of Hocheon Tongdal. State your name." "I am Ulji Gyeongdeok." They fought 20 bouts. Gyeongdeok struck Yuji-gyeom with his bamboo joint whip. Ji-gyeom could not withstand it and fled. Gyeongdeok chased urgently. Then Yuji-bun rushed out and shouted, "Do not harm our father," and rushed in. Gyeongdeok looked closely. His face was black, his height 8 He wore white robes and silver armor, and held a bamboo joint whip. He resembled himself. They fought 20 bouts. Gyeongdeok's whip did not leave Bun's head, and Bun's whip did not leave Gyeongdeok's chest. They did not harm each other. Ji-gyeom turned his horse and attacked from the flank. Being an old general, Gyeongdeok could not match them and was in danger. In-gwi saw this, raised his trident, rushed out, drove back Ji-gyeom and his brother, and repelled the enemy camp. The two men were greatly shocked, could not resist, and fled. Gyeongdeok shouted loudly, "Who are you to save me? If you follow me, I will petition the Son of Heaven to grant you a high rank." In-gwi, fearing Sagui would know, fled to the west. Gyeongdeok returned and reported to the emperor, "Your subject fought the enemy generals and was in danger. Suddenly a young general rushed out and saved me. Surely it was a heavenly god." The emperor said, "This is heaven helping the Tang." At this time Yu-bun returned, saw his mother, and told her about the fight that day. Lady Jong heard it, and tears flowed. Bun asked the reason. Lady Jong said, "Ulji Gong is your father. When we parted, I was pregnant with you. It is now 20 years. Hearing his name today, it is heaven's help." Bun was surprised and asked, "Is there any sign?" Lady Jong pointed to the bamboo joint whip and said, "That whip is originally a male and female pair. One your father took and one he entrusted to me to use as a sign for later." She went into the back room and hanged herself. Bun buried his mother's body behind the house that night, burned the house, mounted his horse, went straight into the camp, cut off Yuji-gyeom's head, came to the Tang camp, and searched for Gyeongdeok. Gyeongdeok was enraged, came out holding his bamboo joint whip, and shouted, "For what reason do you come to fight again?" Bun hurriedly got off his horse, prostrated himself, and wailed. Gyeongdeok was suspicious and asked, "Why do you try to deceive me with trickery?" Bun answered, "Your small son had no eyes and did not recognize his father. The crime is unpardonable even by death. Father, do not doubt." Gyeongdeok only then held him, wailed, heard the full story, and returned to the main camp. At this time, as the emperor was crossing the Great Sea, suddenly it was reported that enemy soldiers were coming. The emperor was greatly shocked. Suddenly, a white-robed young general brandished a trident and rushed out, dashing left and right. The enemy soldiers were in great confusion and scattered in all directions. The emperor was overjoyed and asked, "Who is that young general?" Sagwi said, "It is my deputy general, Seol In-gwi." The emperor said to call him. Sagwi petitioned, "I have already recorded his merit." The emperor asked Deok, "We have crossed the water. Which fortress shall we attack first?" He answered, "I will call Jang Sagwi and ask." He called Sagwi and asked. He answered, "I will think and report." Deok said, "Why do you always go back to think?" He answered, "It is to think quietly." He came out, saw In-gwi and said, "Your merit is great, so I have recorded it all. Where should we attack first?" In-gwi said, "We should attack Phoenix City, Bongwang Song first, but the mountains and rivers are rugged, so it is difficult." Sagwi said, "Think deeply." In-gwi said, "If you wish to attack this city, do such and such." Sagwi was overjoyed and reported this to Deok. Deok said, "Executed as said." Sagwi accepted the order, returned, told In-gwi to act, and said, "I will also support you." In-gwi immediately went below the fortress and attacked urgently from all sides. The defending general guarded firmly. In-gwi immediately commanded the central army, set a trap, led the troops, and lay in ambush at the south gate. That night, the fortress guardian Ak-sun went up the fortress tower and looked. The lights were dim and the night watch drums were chaotic. He thought, "Surely the soldiers are tired and the camp is in disorder. If I attack now, I will defeat them." He drove the military horses inside the fortress, opened the south gate wide, and arrived at the Tang camp. It was completely empty. Only straw men, drums tied to horses' hooves, and bells tied to sheep's feet were jumping about, making a chaotic noise. Knowing he had fallen into a trap, he hurriedly withdrew his troops. At the sound of a signal cannon, the ambushed troops rushed out. Ak-sun fled in panic. In-gwi took advantage of the momentum, seized the fortress, and reported to Sagwi. Sagwi immediately reported to the emperor. The emperor was greatly pleased, entered the fortress, comforted the people, rewarded the three armies, and said to Sagwi, "Perform a strategy to obtain Cheonsan, Sky Mountain, as well." Sagwi petitioned, "Cheonsan is rugged and the seafloor is deep, so it may be difficult." Deok said, "If you are the vanguard and cannot attack a small fortress, how will you deal with Liaodong? Quickly determine a clever strategy and report to the emperor." Sagwi returned, called In-gwi, and asked, "Now we are told to attack Cheonsan. What clever strategy is there?" In-gwi said, "The mountain roads are rugged, so I will investigate and listen, then attack." He packed his gear and went alone on a single horse. At this time, the general guarding Cheonsan, Yu Mungguang, heard that Tang soldiers had attacked Phoenix City and were attacking Cheonsan. He guarded firmly and patrolled with soldiers to spy. In-gwi traveled and reached a place where there was no road and the mountain touched the sky. In-gwi looked at Tongdal's map and sought the road. Suddenly a person rushed out and asked, "What kind of person are you?" In-gwi smiled and said, "I am a merchant. I took the wrong road and came here. Now my provisions are exhausted and I am distressed. Please sell this bow for me." The soldier said, "If our general sees it, he will give a heavy price." He took In-gwi into the fortress, presented the bow, saw Yu Mungguang and said, "While patrolling, we found a merchant trying to sell a bow, so we brought him." Mungguang asked, "Looking at the bow, it is very peculiar. What is the price?" In-gwi answered, "Give as you see fit." Mungguang told his attendants to pull it. They could not move it. Mungguang scolded, "You cannot pull a tiny bow. How will you stop the Tang soldiers?" He pulled it, but it also did not budge. He threw the bow and said, "Can you pull it?" In-gwi said, "It is what I have used all my life. Why could I not?" He pulled it halfway. Mungguang was startled. In-gwi pulled out an arrow and hit Mungguang in the face. His brothers Moonhak and Mungong saw their brother's death and hurriedly tried to rush him with swords. In-gwi threw the bow, took a sword from his body, killed them all in one bout, and shouted loudly, "If you do not surrender, I will kill you all." The soldiers were fleeing, but hearing this, they each sought to live and surrendered. He pacified the fortress and reported to Sagwi. Sagwi was overjoyed and immediately reported to the emperor, "I have obtained Cheonsan. Please march quickly." The emperor was overjoyed, mobilized the three armies, entered the fortress, comforted the people, and each made camp. Deok petitioned, "Cheonsan is rugged. Unless they were divine soldiers, they could not attack it." The three Mungguang brothers were peerlessly brave. Since we obtained it so easily, surely there is a miraculous person in Sagwi's camp. I wish to find him." The emperor said, "The divine general who saved you before has allowed us to obtain Cheonsan. You search for him." Gyeongdeok received the order, returned, and ordered each camp. "I will inspect the officers and soldiers. Do not leave." Sagwi heard this and told In-gwi to guard Hanma Fortress. Gyeongdeok patrolled each camp and inspected the officers and soldiers, but he could not see the white-robed young general. At this time, as In-gwi headed for Hanma Fortress, Uljigong inspected the soldiers and looked for the white-robed general. Hearing that Sagwi had deceived him and substituted Seol In-tae, he looked up to heaven and sighed. Why did heaven create a hero and also create the cunning Sagwi? Why does the king not know? Thinking of the day the state duke came, I am grateful. Gyeongdeok inspected the three armies and reported to the emperor. Your subject hears Jang Sagwi hid the white-robed young general in the camp, attacked Phoenix City and Cheonsan, and now sent him to Hanma Fortress and lied to your majesty. This is treason. Punish his crime and bring down rewards and punishments. The emperor said, I appointed you Grand Marshal, so examine the officers and soldiers and promote or dismiss the military administration as you see fit. Gyeongdeok received the order and intended to strip Sagwi of his post and question his crime first. The emperor was greatly shocked, looked left and right, and said, Who can face the enemy? Before he finished speaking, Deputy Vanguard Uljinam rushed out. The emperor was overjoyed, gave him 5,000 elite soldiers and said, Do not underestimate the enemy. Jinam gave thanks, withdrew, formed a battle formation, and looked at the enemy camp. A general held an iron flail and shouted, Why do you occupy our fortress and try to attack Liaodong? He who will face me, state your name. Uljinam shouted, I am Deputy Vanguard Uljinam, state your name. The enemy general said, I am Chol Baek. He brandished an iron whip and attacked Jinam. Nam also held a bamboo joint whip and fought. After 20 bouts, victory was undecided. Suddenly, from the enemy camp, a general rushed out. This was Chol Ho. He charged left and right. Nam could not match him and fled. Jang Sagwi's deputy Sol Yon-tae held a spear and attacked Chol Baek, but could not last one bout and fled. 10 Tang generals were all defeated. The emperor was greatly shocked, closed the fortress gates, gathered the generals, and discussed. It was reported again that Hapsomun was driving 100,000 elite soldiers. The emperor was even more startled, went up the commander's platform, and looked. Drums and horns shook the earth. Hapsomun surrounded the fortress in 3 layers. The formation was orderly and like an iron bucket. The emperor said, We face such an emergency, what shall we do? The generals were all silent. At this time, Jinsukbo's illness became critical. He called his son Huiyoko and said, After I die, serve the country with loyalty. Be careful of Uljigong. Now the Son of Heaven is in danger. Exhaust your heart and strength. His life ended. He was 73 years old. Huiyoko mourned with extreme grief, buried him in the ancestral mountain, and came to the Tang camp. The emperor called Mugong and said, You said the white-robed young general would come after 100 days. Why is there no news? Mugong said, He will come tomorrow. You will meow. The emperor was half doubting. As the night passed, Gyeongdeok patrolled the camp. Suddenly he saw a young general rushing from the west as if flying. He wore a white robe and silver armor, held a white flag, and shouted, Traitor Hapsomun, surrender at once! He brandished a long spear, entered the Liao camp, and dashed left and right. Wherever the spear swung, the heads of officers and soldiers fell like autumn leaves. No one dared to block him. Gyeongdeok was shocked and praised him. This must be the white-robed young general. The general broke through the encirclement and arrived at the east gate, asking for it to be opened quickly. Gyeongdeok looked closely. It was Jin Huiyoko. He shouted to the soldiers, Go to the north gate. Huiyok thought, He is thinking of our past grudge. He held back his anger and ran to the north gate. Liao soldiers chased urgently. Huiyoko used all his strength to drive them back and reached the gate. Again he shouted, The chasing soldiers are urgent. Go to the south gate. Huiyok looked up to heaven and sighed, I will die in the middle of the road. He whipped his horse and headed for the south gate. Hapsomun blocked the way. Huiyok fought to the death, broke through the encirclement, came to the south gate, and asked for it to be opened. Gyeongdeok again shouted, "The enemy is urgent. I cannot open it." Huyok looked back. Hapsomun was close. It was truly critical. At this time, the Son of Heaven dozed for a moment. Jinsukbo entered and petitioned, "Your subject's child is in danger outside the south gate." He woke up startled. It was a dream. Surprised, he went up the fortress tower and looked. It was Jin Huyoke. He hurriedly opened the gate and let him in. Huyok prostrated himself, wailed, and announced his father's death. The emperor lamented, set up a mourning table, mourned with the officials, and asked Mugong, "You said the white-robed young general would come today at noon. The time has passed, and there is no trace. What is this?" Mugong said, "You met Huyoko today. Isn't that him? Tomorrow, you will truly meet the white-robed young general." The next day, the emperor waited on the commander's platform. The Liao soldiers surrounded the fortress like an iron bucket, so he worried greatly. The emperor was pleased and said, "His bravery is so miraculous. He is truly the white-robed young general." He called Mugong and said, "If we get a general like that, why should we worry about destroying Liao Dong?" Mugong petitioned, "This seems to be the person your majesty saw in the dream. If you do not meet him today, you will meet him in another 100 days. The emperor said, "Liao's soldiers fill the mountains and fields, and there is no empty space on all sides. How can we wait 100 days? He called Dan Jihyun and told him to call the white-robed young general. Jihyun received the order, went out the fortress with a single horse and spear, and shouted, "White-robed general, do not fight but come to Wolho fortress." In-gwi heard this, feared Jang Sagwi would know, and fled toward Cheongseok Valley. Dan Jihyun chased urgently, met an enemy general, fought 70 bouts, broke through the front, and ran. His horse exhausted its strength and fell. Liao soldiers rushed in, bound him, and told him to surrender. Jihyun scolded, "How can I surrender to traitorous petty men? Kill me quickly." Having no choice, they beheaded him at the camp gate. At this time, Jang Sagwi had camped at Cheongsan. Hearing In-gwi fled, he was greatly shocked and called Sol Yontae to find him. Yontae rode a single horse to the entrance of Cheongseok Valley, did not see him, met a Liao general, and died in one bout. Sagwi heard and was greatly shocked. "Yontae is dead. If I do not find In-gwi, it will be a great disaster." He ordered the 3 armies to cut much brushwood, pile it at the entrance of Cheongseok Valley, and set it on fire. The flames reached the sky. At this time, In-gwi, having crushed the Liao soldiers on a single horse, feared Sagwi and entered Cheongseok Valley. Suddenly fire rose on the mountain. In-gwi tried to come out hurriedly, but the fire rose gradually on all sides and there was no way out. The fire became more urgent. Flustered, he got off his horse, looked up to heaven and sighed. "It is not sad to die, but 7 men including Wang Sunui die because of me. How is it not sad?" They held each other and wailed. Suddenly, all sides grew dark, thunder shook, and rain poured down. The fire was extinguished at once. The heaven and earth cleared. Just as he was finding the way, suddenly from the air a voice shouted, "In-gwi, go to the east." In-gwi gave thanks to heaven countless times and came out. Hapsomun's deputy Wontae brandished a spear, rushed out, and shouted, "Surrender quickly." In-gwi was enraged, brandished his trident, and fought. Wontae could not last 2 bouts and fled. In-gwi whipped his horse and chased urgently. Wontae secretly drew his bow and hit In-gwi's arm. In-gwi was enraged and tried to fight, but his arm hurt. He looked up to heaven and sighed, "I have fought many times and never been defeated. I crushed Hapsomun's many strong soldiers without match. Now I am defeated like this by a small bandit. How can I pacify the Liao bandits?" He said, "Jugyong-un and the others, return to camp. I will find a house somewhere, treat my arm, and return." He parted from them. In-gwi searched for a house on his horse, passed Sangnim Garden, looked up to heaven and sighed, "I have seriously injured my arm by a tiny bandit. How is it not shameful?" He traveled gradually and saw a house in the distance. He entered, no one was there. While he hesitated, a fairy lifted the bamboo blind and scolded In-gwi, "A great man born into the world should serve the country with all his loyalty. Now the Son of Heaven is in danger. Why do you hide your body, come deep into these mountains, and try to do what?" In-gwi bowed with hands clasped and answered, "How would this small general not exhaust his loyalty? I was injured in the arm by a small bandit and wished to treat the wound." The fairy said, I am not a human being. If you are truly so, stay in the outer quarters for a while and treat it. In-gwi apologized in fear. The fairy said, "Let me see your wound for a moment." He took off his armor. The fairy looked and was shocked. The general almost lost his life. She called a maid to bring medicine and gave it to him. In-gwi asked the name of the medicine. The fairy said, "It is 1,000 gold pill. It is effective for 100 diseases. Apply it quickly." The fairy opened a box, took out armor, gave it to him, and said, "This armor is heavenly armor. If you wear it, swords, spears, water, and fire will all avoid you, and heat, cold, and disease will not violate you. It is a treasure." He received it and looked. 5 colors were brilliant and the radiance was glittering. He prostrated on the ground and gave thanks. When he rose and looked, there were only precipitous cliffs, green bamboo, and azure pines. In-gwi was greatly surprised, gave thanks to the air countless times, and headed for the main camp. At this time, the Son of Heaven sent Dan Ji-hyun from Wolho Fortress and waited for the white-robed young general. Soldiers reported, "Dan Ji-hyun died in the disturbance." The emperor sighed, "It is all my fault." Gyeongdeok petitioned, "Hap Somun has retreated. Please march at this time." The emperor immediately issued orders, mobilized the great army, left the fortress, camped under a distant mountain, and rested. Wonhwa, the general guarding Yubong camp, led 3,000 soldiers and attacked the main camp. The emperor said, "Who can match him?" Before he finished speaking, Jin Huioke rushed out. The emperor said, "You fought much at Wolho Fortress and were injured. Rest for now." Ulji-mun rushed out again. The emperor was greatly pleased and permitted it. Huioke was angry, jumped out, and competed with Mun for the vanguard. The emperor said, "The enemy soldiers are urgent, yet you create internal strife. Your disloyalty is evident." Mugong petitioned, "Send another general." Ulji-nam rushed out. The emperor gave him 5,000 soldiers. Jinam spurred his horse and shouted, "Traitor, receive my sword quickly." Was enraged. How can a yellow-mouthed child speak like this? He rushed in and fought 10-odd bouts. Nam feigned defeat and fled. Wonwi chased urgently. Nam turned his horse, gave a shout, and struck Wonwi's chest with the bamboo joint whip. He could not avoid it in time, was hit in the chest, vomited blood, ran into the fortress, and did not come out. The emperor said, "Wonmil and others do not come out. What strategies do you have?" Gyeongdeok petitioned, "Call Sagwi and ask." The emperor said, "You go and ask." Gyeongdeok immediately saw Sagwi and asked for the strategy to defeat Yubong camp. Sagwi pondered and said, "Yubong camp has many guarding generals and is rugged, so it may be difficult to attack." Gyeongdeok scolded greatly. Phoenix City and Wolho Fortress were extremely rugged and had many generals, yet you always went back to camp and thought of strategies well. Now you say tiny Yubong camp is difficult and do not think. Surely you have lost your teacher. Sagwi's face was full of shame and he said, "If you tolerate me for a few days, I will think of a strategy and report." Gyeongdeok said, "Now the bandits are urgent. How can we wait a few days? Think quickly. If you delay, I will execute military law." Sagwi was terrified out of his wits, returned to camp, and thought of In-gwi. At this time, Hap Somun was studying the flying sword, Jayangyeom, from a master at Yangsan. Before 100 days were full, soldiers reported that the Tang Emperor led a great army, camped under Yubong camp, and fought and was defeated again. Hap Somun's anger exploded. "I will behead Shimin and relieve my grudge." He immediately came to Yubong camp, urged the soldiers, held the flying sword, mounted his horse, came out of the camp, and shouted loudly, "Shimin falsely calls himself emperor and despises me, invading. I will cut off your head and relieve my grudge, so surrender quickly and avoid death." He galloped back and forth. The emperor was startled, looked left and right, and said, "Hap Somun insults me like this. Who can relieve my grudge?" Before he finished speaking, Gyeongdeok rushed out and said, "Your subject will behead the bandit and relieve your majesty's worry." The emperor was greatly pleased and implored Gyeongdeok, "Do not underestimate the enemy." Deok held his bamboo joint whip, rushed out, and scolded, "Traitor Hap Somun, do you know me? Though I am old, I will tear you to pieces." He rushed in. Somun was enraged, and they clashed and fought. The shouts shook heaven and earth. They fought over 100 bouts, but there was no victory or defeat. Hap Somun laughed and said, How about we strike each other's back 5 times with whips? If one cannot endure, he surrenders. Gyeongdeok agreed. Hapsomun lay face down on the saddle. Gyeongdeok struck with his whip using all his lifelong strength, but he did not move. He took the blows calmly, sat up, laughed, and said, I have already endured your whip. Now you endure my whip just once. Gyeongdeok was greatly shocked and fled hurriedly. Originally, Hapsomun used not physical strength, but the magic arts of a Taoist. Somun saw Gyeongdeok fleeing, whipped his horse, followed, and shouted, Common fellow, surrender quickly. He drove the great army and surrounded them on all sides. The killing aura pierced the sky. Somun looked and saw the Tang Emperor sitting at the foot of Hwangryang Mountain in the Mu. Hapsomun abandoned Gyeongdeok's defeat, urged the rear army, and climbed the mountain. Who could oppose him? The Tang soldiers turned pale with fright and blocked the great army to fight. At this time, the Tang generals were guarding passes in various places, and there were only Gyeongdeok's 3 father and sons and Jinhwe-ok. All of Hapsomun's generals joined forces to fight. Drums, horns, and shouts shook the mountains and rivers. They fought over 100 bouts, neither side retreating. Corpses were like Mount Tai, and blood flowed like a stream. Somun dashed left and right. The Tang soldiers could not resist and crumbled on all sides. Somun took advantage of the victory and galloped back and forth. Gyeongdeok fled again after 50 bouts. Somun gave a great shout, looked at Taizong, and rushed in. It was truly critical. Mugong petitioned, Hapsomun has taken the lead. Please mount your horse. The emperor was greatly shocked, mounted his horse, and fled hurriedly with Mugong. There were only about 10 followers. The rest of the warriors each sought their own lives and vanished. Taizong fled urgently, but a great river blocked the way and the pursuing soldiers were urgent. The emperor looked up to heaven and sighed, If you intend to bless Shimin, let me cross this river. If I have no virtue, let me fall into this river and die. He prayed. Hapsomun had already arrived, brandished his spear, and shouted loudly, Shimin, do not run! He knocked an arrow and shot. The emperor was hit in the left eye. He barely reached the riverside and warned his horse, Though you are a beast, save your master's urgency. He struck it with a whip. The horse gathered its hooves, tried to jump, and fell over. The emperor fell to the ground and could not rise. He intended to commit suicide. Hapsomun had already arrived, scolded greatly, and demanded a surrender letter. The emperor was distraught and could not bear to kill himself. He said, There is no paper and brush. What shall I do? Somun glared and scolded, If you cherish your life, tear off your clothes, bite your finger, and write with blood. He raised his spear to stab. The emperor, having no choice, tore off the hem of his dragon robe and tried to bite his finger, but it hurt so much he could not bite it. How could heaven not observe this? At this time, Seol In-gwi parted from the ferry and headed for the main camp. Suddenly a soldier reported, The Son of Heaven was defeated by Hapsomun, and we do not know where he went. In-gwi was greatly shocked. In a hurry, with a single horse and spear, he looked into the distance. Dust on the riverside touched the sky. He hurriedly whipped his horse and arrived at the riverside. Enemy soldiers surrounded it like an iron bucket on all sides. He smashed his way in. The Son of Heaven was already kneeling before Hapsomun. His anger pierced the sky. He gave a great shout, attacked Somun directly, fought, tucked the emperor under his arm, whipped his horse, jumped across the river, got off the horse, and applied the immortal medicine to Taizong's wound. It healed in an instant. In-gwi prostrated himself and petitioned, That your majesty is like this today is all your subjects' crime. The emperor calmed his mind and looked. His body was across the river, and looking at the person, it was the white-robed young general he saw in his dream before. He held his hand and asked, Are you not the white-robed young general? In-gwi petitioned, Your subject is Seol In-gwi, who was under Jang Sagwi's command. The emperor said, Heaven helped so that you saved me. To what can I compare this merit? He praised him endlessly. At this time, Hapsomun saw a young general appear out of nowhere, saved Taizong, and cross the river. He was greatly shocked. This is a heavenly god. He whipped his horse, crossed the river, and attacked In-gwi directly. In-gwi fought back. After 30-odd bouts, victory was undecided. Hapsomun raised his flying sword. It reached In-gwi but suddenly turned to ash. Somun turned pale with shock. He thought of his teacher's words from before. Seol In-gwi wears heavenly armor, so you cannot match him. This person is Seol In-gwi. He turned his horse and fled. In-gwi called out loudly, "Old thief, do not run." He drew his bow and shot. Responding to the bowstring, Hapsomun fell from his horse. In-gwi rushed in, cut off his head, destroyed the enemy camp, returned, and presented the head to Taizong. The emperor was overjoyed, held In-gwi's hand, and said, "If not for the general's help, I would have become a lonely ghost in the enemy camp." He returned. At this time, Gyeongdeok, having lost the Son of Heaven to Hapsomun's defeat, did not know where he had gone and was running about in panic. Suddenly, a soldier reported the news of Hapsomun's defeat. Gyeongdeok was overjoyed and came looking for the Tang camp. On the way, he met Taizong. Mugong and other defeated generals were all gathered. The emperor wailed and said, "Many officers and soldiers died because of me. I am alive now, but how is it not sad?" The officials also wailed. The emperor faced In-gwi and said, "I saw you briefly in a dream and thought of you always. How could I expect that today you would save me from danger, restore the state, and rescue the people from distress?" He praised him endlessly. In-gwi prostrated and petitioned, "Your subject was originally In-gwi, son of Seol Mo of Yongmun-hyeon. My parents died early, and I wandered alone with no one to rely on. I met Wang Sonui and others, came together to Jang Sagwi's camp, suffered insults, and intended to die. But I met Jung Gyogum, who saved me, and I served in the army." He also petitioned about obtaining the horse, spear, and heavenly armor, obtaining Phoenix City and Cheonsan, and entering the Earth Cavern, saying, "This too is the help of the spirits and your majesty's great fortune." The emperor, hearing this, lamented Sagwi's deception and intended to ask his crime. Gyeongdeok said to In-gwi, "Do you know the incident where you pushed me and left at Hanma Fortress before?" In-gwi apologized. "I feared it was Sagwi spying. Please forgive the crime." The emperor heard In-gwi's words and was furious. "Knowing my intent to find the white-robed young general, he hid you in the camp and established his own merit. How can I let such a wicked traitor live for even a moment?" He ordered Gyeongdeok to interrogate and behead him. Gyeongdeok received the order, sat high on the commander's platform, ordered the army to arrest Jang Sagwi. The soldiers accepted the order, arrested Sagwi, and made him kneel. Gyeongdeok shouted loudly, "You were entrusted with a heavy responsibility and should have exhausted your loyalty. Yet you hid In-gwi and deceived the sovereign. You know your crime." He ordered the warriors to take him outside the camp gate and behead him. He reported to Taizong. The emperor's anger was not yet settled, so he ordered the extermination of his 3 generations. The emperor discussed the merits of the generals and bestowed titles. He ennobled In-gwi as Prince of Pyongryo and Marquis of Nongyeong, Gyeongdeok as General of Chariots and Cavalry, and Marquis of Yongwon, Jung Gyogum as Inspector of Capital Gates. He bestowed titles on the officials in order. The officials each gave thanks and withdrew. The emperor comforted the people and rewarded the generals and soldiers. Governors of each province and magistrates of each town came out to the streets and shouted, "Long live the emperor." He returned the troops, entered the capital, bestowed titles on the remaining officials, and rewarded the people of the city. Everyone, men and women, old and young, praised his holy virtue. He held a banquet of great peace and enjoyed it with the collected officials. Seol In-gwi presented a mi. The emperor received it and looked. The writing said, "White-robed young General Seol In-gwi bows 100 times and presents this letter to your majesty. Your subject is originally a commoner. I took Wang Sonui and others to Jang Sagwi's camp, received insults, and barely managed to stay. By the imperial majesty's great fortune, I pacified the bandits and undeservedly received the title of prince. I am overwhelmed with awe. Your subject wishes to return the title, go back to my hometown to comfort the spirits of my ancestors, find my wife and children, return, and serve your majesty. I pray your majesty examines your subject's situation." The emperor finished reading, looked back at the officials, and said, "In-gwi's loyalty is like this. Also, if not for In-gwi, how would we enjoy today?" He immediately retrieved the royal patent, but kept him there. In-gwi thanked him for the grace and returned. Ju Gyeong-un and the others also presented memorials. They packed their belongings to travel with the Prince of Pyongryo, Seol In-gwi. Marquis of Lu Mugong, Duke of Gyeongdeok, Inspector Jung Gyeogum, Imperial Son-in-Law Commandant Jin Hweokok, Left Prime Minister Bang Hyun-ryong, Right Prime Minister Du Yo-hoi, Left General Ulji Nam, Right General Ulji Bun, and other civil and military officials saw them off at the Pavilion 10 outside the South Gate. The splendor was incomparable. They held hands and repeatedly urged a quick return. Upon parting, the Prince of Pyongyang led Ju Gyong-un and others, generals and soldiers, entered the palace gate of his home state and sat in the hall. The grandeur and strict order were like that of the great empire itself. The Prince of Pyongyang wore a red gold dragon robe and a purple gold Tongcheon crown, held a white jade scepter, and sat on the dragon bed. The civil and military officials paid respects in order. He set up a banquet, enjoyed the day, ended the banquet, and immediately personally sacrificed to the royal ancestral shrine and visited the tombs. Prime Minister Yi Han and Minister of Rights Wang Sok prepared the ritual field, posthumously honored his father as King Jungseo, and when composing the sacrificial text, the king's dragon tears soaked his dragon robe. There was no official who did not grieve. After the sacrifice, he held a great assembly, granted the people of the river village tax exemption for 10 years, and gave many rewards. The people were overjoyed and shouted, "Long live." When the king returned to the palace, the people high and low praised his virtue and sang of peace. At this time, Prime Minister Yi Han and Minister of Rights Wang Sok petitioned, "Now your highness's main palace is empty. Please select a queen mother to serve." The king said, "Your opinions are correct. I heard before that Ryu Jung-in of Punghwa village has a daughter whose virtue is high. Who knows of her?" Royal Secretary Jung Han said, "Your subject knew Ryu Jung-in. He left Punghwa village and went to Jeolho." The king asked, "Why did he go so far to live?" Jung Han said, "He went following his destiny." The king asked, "How about calling Ryu Jung-in back?" Yi Han answered, "Summon him with an official post." The king immediately ordered a historian to give a royal edict, which said, "I admire your loyalty and, thinking of old matters, wish to make you a teacher. I have swept the hall and wait standing." The ritual officer immediately went to Soho village. Previously, Lady Ryu packed her things, sent Seol In-gwi away, and could not overcome her sorrow and loneliness. She looked toward where he had gone, could not settle her mind, entered the house, and saw it was desolate and she had no relatives. How could it not be pitiable? She closed the door, bathed and purified herself, burned incense, and prayed to the spirits of heaven and earth. Ill-fated concubine Ryu Yongchun bows 100 times and reports, "My sins and my past life are heavy. I offended my parents and was cast out. With a lonely and single heart, I relied on Seol In-gwi. Now he has gone to the imperial capital. May the sun, moon, and stars of heaven and earth observe this lonely life, allow In-gwi to destroy the traitors, achieve merit, and return safely." She finished praying, entered the inner room, and grieved day and night. There was an old woman in the neighboring house who was very honest. That old woman said to Lady Ryu, "Young lady, you grieve alone like that. My house is quiet and I am alone. How about we rely on each other, wait for your husband, and seek glory together?" Lady Ryu thanked her. "To take in a person with no relatives is a grace hard to forget. Since I have nowhere to rely on yet, I will stay with you." She treated the old woman like her own mother, and the old woman treated her like her own daughter. At this time, Jung Yonggi and Dusi were very happy that there was no news of Lady Ryu. Meanwhile, Ryu Jung-in sorrowed day and night after sending his daughter away, but did not look for her. One day he was tired and dozed for a moment. Messengers of many colors came in and took him away. Arriving at a place, he looked. 3 Taoist immortals and 3 ladies were sitting. They said, "Ryu Jung-in, listen to the command." Jung-in prostrated himself. A fairy scolded him. "A fairy of the heavenly palace committed a crime and became a child in your house. She has a heavenly destined connection with In-gwi. You did not know heaven's number, persecuted her, loaded her with a bad name, and cast her out. Where is there such a principle? Examine this henceforth." She sent him out. He woke up startled. It was a dream on the bed. He told Lady Jang the dream and searched for Lady Ryu with servants. Meihyang entered Punghwa village after many days and searched, but there was no trace. She was very distressed. One day she entered a tavern and lamented that she could not find Sol Taegwan's house. The tavern keeper said, "Why do you look for Sol Taegwan's house?" Meihyang answered, "If you know the mistress, please tell me." The old woman said, "It has been several months since Lord Sol went to the imperial capital. If the master calls, there must be a letter." "Give it to me." The servants gave the letter. The old woman went in, reported, and presented the letter. The young lady received it and looked. It said, "I was unprincipled and cut off the ethics of father and child. Now I am moved, and braving shame, I send this letter. It is regret. I did not know the heavenly feelings and cut off the heavenly bond. How could I be heartless? Now I send a carriage. Do not resent past events. Return quickly and comfort your parents' feelings." After seeing the letter, the young lady could not calm her depression. Meihyang offered clothes. The young lady prepared for the journey and said to the old woman, "Mother, you provided for my lonely self with utmost care. I intended to stay with you all my life, and when Lord Sol succeeded and returned, to repay your kindness. Unexpectedly, a letter from my parents came. As a child, I cannot be at peace, so I leave your knees. My feelings are sad. However, we will meet again another day. Mother, stay healthy in the meantime." The old woman held the young lady's hand, wept, and said, "Because I have no children, I loved you, young lady, and comforted your sorrow. I knew there would be a parting once, but how could I know you would leave today?" Tears gushed like a spring. The young lady was moved by her feelings and also grieved. She parted from the tavern mother, left the road, and arrived at her original home in 3 days. The servants went in and announced the young lady's arrival. Lady Zhang heard it, could not overcome her joy, came out hurriedly, held the young lady, and wailed loudly. The grass, trees, birds, and beasts all seemed to grieve. At this time, the arm Ryu Jungin had been hit N in the dream hurt severely. After seeing the young lady, it healed immediately. He could know heaven's will. Mother and daughter expressed their longing feelings. After a few days passed, the young lady felt unwell and lay on her bedding. Suddenly, strange clouds surrounded the house. Fragrance filled the air, and the young lady was in a stupor. After a while, she gave birth smoothly to a jade boy. His face was like jade, and his appearance was extraordinary. The Wono was overjoyed and wanted to name him. The young lady said, "When Solsang left, he said if a boy is born, call him Pyeongsan. Please do so." The Wonoi finally named him Pyeongsan. He grew gradually. At 4 or 5 years old, he knew all characters without being taught and accomplished literature. One day, a pair of magpies came, sat on a plum branch, cried, and left. The Wonoi obtained a divination sign. It was a most auspicious omen. He wondered in his heart. Suddenly, servants hurriedly reported, "The local governor and a historiographer have come outside the gate." The Wonoi was shocked and hurriedly met the historiographer. The historiographer presented a decree. He immediately set up an incense table and opened it. It was a patent for the Queen Mother, Sang Tae-hu, and an order summoning him quickly. He entertained the historiographer, immediately prepared his belongings, headed for the capital, settled in his residence, and the next day gave thanks and returned to his place. Prime Minister Yi Han presented the selection letter and told him to prepare the wedding dowry and procedures. The Grand Marshal, Taiwi, was shocked and said, "I had one daughter in my late years, and she is betrothed to Seol In-gwi, son of Seol Gambek, and has even given birth to a child. Do not discuss this. You have mistaken the grace." Yi Han had nothing to say, returned, and reported exactly so. The king said, "A daughter's chastity depends on her husband. Soothe him again." Yi Han immediately went to Lord Ryu's residence and announced the king's earnest intent. The Grand Marshal changed color and said, "The ruler is the root of the country. He tries to deceive a subject with office and take away a daughter's chastity. The good and evil of the politics can be known. Not only me, but my daughter's ice and jade-like chastity will not change, even if an axe is in front of her. How could I covet rank and salary and leave a stigma on my child? Now I will abandon my office, return to my hometown, and wash away my unspeakable conduct. You go back and report exactly this." Yi Han returned abashed and reported exactly so. The king laughed and said, "I intended to test Lord Ryu's will. Since their integrity is such, it cannot be done with dignity. You go again, tell my background is such and such, and happily appoint her as the main palace." Yihan immediately went to the Grand Marshal's residence and conveyed the king's command. The Grand Marshal was shocked and said, "If so, what is the holy name?" Yihan said, "How can there be a reason not to know your son-in-law's name and background?" He told the before and after. The Lord heard and said, "If it is so, my daughter will not believe it easily. I will go in, tell her in detail, and come out." He went in and said to his wife and daughter, Prime Minister Yihan came and said, Solsang went to the imperial capital, succeeded, became the Prince of Pyongyang, and appoints the young lady as the main palace to perform the wedding ceremony. The young lady answered, "The king has newly ascended, so we do not know if he is good or not. This must be a trick involved. How can we ruin a great matter with words?" The Grand Marshal said, "How could one become a king and deceive a subject?" The young lady answered, "Though father's words are like this, when I parted with Solsang in the beginning, not knowing the future, we used a jade ring and a writing as proof to verify later. Transmit these words and decide the matter." The Lord considered it right, came out to the outer quarters, faced Yihan, and transmitted the daughter's words. Yihan returned and reported the reason. The king admired her integrity, immediately put a letter and a message in a gold box, gave it to Yihan, and sent it to the Ryu residence. Lord Ryu opened the box, took out the young lady's handwritten letter and the jade ring, and gave them to the young lady. She received and looked. They were undoubtedly her own tokens. The young lady, holding back tears, said, "When I parted with Solsang in the beginning, how could I know today?" She felt both joy and sorrow. At this time, Yihan returned. The Prince of Liao issued a decree to designate a separate palace for Lady Ryu to reside in, had maids and palace overseers guard the separate palace, bestowed daily necessities, and ordered the ceremony to be performed quickly. The Grand Marshal immediately selected an auspicious day. At this time, the Prince of Pyongyang had the ritual officers prepare wedding implements, waited for the day, and went to the separate palace to meet the main palace, Queen. The king wore the Tongcheon crown, a red gold dragon robe on his body, and a Tongcheon rhinoceros belt at his waist. He entered, performed the ritual of presenting the wild goose, entered the inner hall, and drank the nuptial cup. The king, together with the queen, arrived at the central hall. Left and right attendants guided them, and they finished the morning audience in order. The civil and military officials finished the banquet, returned, and praised the virtue. That night, the king spent the harmonious night with the queen, told the stories of before and after, saying, "How could we expect it to be like this today?" He also held his son rejoiced, and their mutual affection was incomparable. The next day, when receiving the morning assembly, the officials petitioned for the investiture of the queen and the crown prince. The king granted it, invested Lady Ryu as queen and Pyeongsan as crown prince. The 100 officials shouted, "Long live," and the assembly ended. At this time, the king enjoyed time daily with the 6 men, including Ju Gyung-un. One day, the 6 men reported to the king, "We younger brothers abandoned parents, wives, and children to follow the king and attack bandits for 5 or 6 years. Now that the world is pacified, we should return to our hometowns. But because of the king's great affair, we could not leave. Now we wish to return and comfort our parents, wives, and children." The king said, "You wise brothers' words are correct. Go back, see your parents, lead your families, return quickly, settle your homes, and make the brotherly affection complete." The 6 men bowed and tried to go. The king said, "I almost forgot one thing. Before, when I was attacking Liaodong, I passed a place and heard a child crying. Suspicious, I searched and found a 5 or 6-year-old girl in the bushes, nearly dead. I pitied her, hurriedly fed her medicine, and asked her background. She is the daughter of Vice Minister Du Yong, and her name is Okyong. I took her, entrusted her to palace maids, and raised her. Wise brothers, look." He immediately called Okyong. Everyone looked. She was a beauty of the age, with snow-white skin and flower-like face. The king stroked her and said, "From now on, practice the duty of father and daughter." He made her his adopted daughter, had her pay respects to the 6 men with the etiquette of an uncle, formed a brother-sister bond with Crown Prince Pyeongsan, titled Okyong as Princess Uyeon, and regarded her like his own flesh and blood. Okyong served him like a real parent. On this day, the king called Lord Ryu and his wife and Jang Myung-gi and his wife to comfort them. He made Lord Ryu the state father-in-law, Lady Yang the state lady, gave Jang Myung-gi an official post, and rewarded Dusi. Myung-gi and his wife thought of their past mistreatment and feared punishment. But unexpectedly, receiving such rewards, they were moved, repented, felt ashamed, reformed themselves, and became virtuous people. At this time, when Okyong grew up, the king made Jin, the son of Prime Minister Choi Moon, the royal son-in-law. His age was 23. At this time, the 6 men bade farewell to the king and set out on the road. The king gave many rewards and saw them off specially. Meanwhile, Emperor Taizong thought of Wang Sonuai's death in battle, grieved, bestowed gold, silk, and satin on his father Wang Yul, and immediately called Wang Sonuai's son Wang Chol, aged 14, who was a hero of the age in literature and martial arts, made him a royal son-in-law, and honored his father's merit. Meanwhile, Prince of Pyongryeo's consort, Lady Ryu, reported to the king, "Thinking of the poverty in Ponghwa village in the old days, my heart is sorrowful. I have not repaid that old woman's grace, and it is knotted in my heart. At that time, if not for the old woman taking me in, how would I receive today's wealth and honor? Originally, after your highness went to the imperial capital, my body lived lonely in the deep mountains and valleys, and I could not settle my mind. That old woman took me in and raised me with good clothes and food. How can I not repay the grace? If I do not repay, how could bright heaven be unfeeling?" Hearing these words, the king admired and said, "How could there be no repayment?" Immediately he bestowed on the old woman the patent of a lady, posthumously honored her late husband as Grand Marshal, gave slaves and fields to maintain ancestral rights, and immediately sent a historian to call the old woman. At this time, after parting with the young lady, the old woman was sorrowful and spent time without interest in anything. One day, it was noisy outside the gate, and villagers came in and said, "Some official is looking for the old woman." The old woman was greatly shocked and invited him to the outer quarters first. The historian came in, asked in detail, and delivered the lady's patent and the summoning decree. The old woman was greatly shocked and pleased, entertained the historian, immediately packed her belongings, and arrived at the capital. The king immediately called her in, gave her a seat in the hall, and thanked her for the past. The old woman bowed and did not dare to speak. Lady Ryu invited her to the inner hall, welcomed her, and thanked her for the past. The old woman also rejoiced and thanked them for the awe-inspiring honor. The queen treated her with even more respect, and they spent their lives together. At this time, the country was at peace, harvests were abundant every year, the people were wealthy, there were no bandits in the mountains, no one picked up lost items on the road, soldiers did not know weapons, and the king also put aside martial arts. His descendants prospered and enjoyed wealth and honor for generations.